This is Derek. Recently, I watched Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I'd like to share with you some of my impressions of the film, as well as some of the symbols and themes and storytelling and patterns that I think really worked and worked well. This will include some spoilers, but first, I'll start off with some overall impressions and caveats. Here we go. This film had a lot of pressure coming into it. This is not just the conclusion of a trilogy. This is the conclusion of a trilogy of trilogies. This is episode 9. So there's plots and developments and character arcs and all of these things culminating into this grand finale. Can you imagine being the writer, having to sort through a story that resolves all of these things in a satisfactory way? In addition, there's been a recent downward trend, you could call it, due to the disappointment of the recent films, which resulted in, for the first time ever, a Star Wars film losing money with the story of Solo. So, going into the film, if I were to think of the rating as a 10 out of 10, 10 being the highest and 1 being the least, and the most recent Star Wars film, Episode 8, getting a score of -3, then really the best that this film could do, getting a 10-point score, would be 7, which isn't too bad. Overall, I'd say this is a good movie, an enjoyable movie. I felt satisfied as a viewer, and I also felt pretty fulfilled as a fan. Now, the goal of the rest of this video is to draw out the symbols and patterns and storytelling that I feel really worked well. Here are now spoilers. So, if you haven't watched the film, pause here, go watch Star Wars Episode 9, come back, watch the rest of this interpretive video, and tell me what you think in the comments below. First of all, Palpatine. Palpatine's back! Seriously? You're going to bring back Palpatine? You can't come up with a new bad guy or something like that? But throughout the course of the film, I felt like his character was written really well. He was the archetype of evil. There was a point where I felt like he made the checkmate move, and there was no way that the good guys, the beloved characters, were ever going to get out of it. And that's really what you want in a bad guy, is you want to see that there's a moment where he is infallible, indestructible. You want to have a moment, not too long of a moment, where you're feeling despair and there's no hope as a viewer. But then, of course, the hope comes and you feel resolution. Kylo Ren and Rey Dyad, as it's called. Okay, episodes 7 and 8, I was sensing that they were going the direction of the twin trope, where similar to Leia and Luke Skywalker, that there was going to be this synchronicity and harmony between twins because they were birthed that way. Not to say that's a trope that's bad or anything. It's just we had that before, so it felt like it was going to be cheap if they're going to go that route. But they didn't. Instead, they went with what they call a dyad in the Force. And I thought this was a very sophisticated move on the writer's part, because what it's doing is it really is drawing upon this ancient way of describing what's called androgynous relationship, or an androgen being. For example, in the earliest stories of the Bible, in the Genesis creation stories, there's an argument that Adam was really created as an androgen. That is, the male and female, or the masculine and the feminine, are within one being. Then Eve is drawn out, the female feminine is drawn out, and you have male and female, both still synced up and in a unity that signifies oneness, but two persons. There's also the picture of marriage. And so the writers decided to draw upon this dyadic relationship or this androgynous relationship with Ren and Rey, which would explain some of those plot gaps that seem to not work at all with the previous film, where these two could somehow transcend time, but especially space, where they see visions of each other, but also they're able to grab necklaces or grab things or have fights, even though they're in two separate places. So they're transcending space in these moments and in these scenes. This, as a viewer, felt like it satisfied a lot of the confusion that I had leading up to their relationship. The resurrection theme. If you can't pick up on it already, the name of the movie really lets you know that the theme is, in fact, resurrection. And it's all over the place. Good guys, bad guy, major characters and minor characters, creatures, and even robots are rising from the dead, or being restored, or being healed, finding new identities, dying to the old, and rising anew. It's resurrection, people. That's what the movie's about. And we get this theme throughout the video. Baptism. Baptism is another theme that these writers are drawing upon. And it's an important element in symbolism of resurrection. Of course, the scene that really is the climax of the baptism symbolism in this movie is the graveyard of the Death Star. The scene where Kylo Ren and Rey are doing battle and they're facing their old demons and they're trying to find some type of breakthrough that's eluding them to that point. There's also the symbolism of water in this scene. It's taking place at near the shore, in the ocean, in the abyss. Of course, this conjures up the meaning of the primordial waters over the face of the earth. Chaos and disorder and random potential and recreation also. So where with primordial waters, we can also think of this as a flood, where the old is washed away or flooded, and from that has the emergence of a new age or a new person, a new identity. And of course, water also symbolizes the point of this transition. Alexander the Great did it. Moses and the Israelites crossed water twice at the Red Sea and also the Jordan River. It's also where Elisha and John the Baptizer and Jesus, heck, even George Washington crossing the Delaware. It's where the old nation or the old way of organizing government and nationhood are gone, and the new rise of the nation is born. So in baptism and in resurrection, there's part or all of individuals and communities or nations or the earth, the cosmos, or an entire age. The old dies, the new arises. Okay, so in this scene, what's happening? Kylo is killed by his own sword of wickedness. The very sword that he used as a weapon for evil and for destruction and death. His dyadic partner thrusts it into his thorax. Those who live by the sword die by the sword, as it said of Jesus of Nazareth. Ren decides to use her newfound force to give up part of her life force in order to restore or heal in him. Of course, this weakens her greatly, but it saves him from this death-causing injury. He's also probably pretty upset because she kind of ruined his down vest that he had going on there. And I don't know about you guys, but shoot, down vests are precious. to people who own them. And the fact that she just totally ruined it with the lightsaber and didn't even, I mean, she was down there healing his wounds and his loins. And I mean, the least she could do was at least stitch up with her life force energy power the hole in his vest. Okay, so he's healed from that. And there's this resurrection moment. Which part of him is resurrected is to this point unclear. His dad, Han Solo, shows up when they start sorting it out. He wasn't glowing in that scene. Was he supposed to be glowing? Kylo needs to decide. Is it the destructive dark side that dies? Or is it his good side, the Ben Solo side? Which is it going to be? And in the figure of the father shows up and guides him to his true, his original identity. So Kylo rises with true identity, a new name, his original name, Ben, son of Solo, son of Skywalker. The potential of goodness is fully realized. We see a true baptism into goodness. And where we see this, there's also in the very same scene what appears to be a false baptism, where in the character of Rey, she has a point where she dies to part of herself as well, but the part of her that is the good self, the destructive self, emerges. And what results is that she abandons her mission. She assumes a false identity of Palpatine and evil, and she succumbs to an unlived potential of goodness. Sacrifice is also a very important theme in this film. And it's also another element that goes hand in glove with resurrection and baptism, because in resurrection, the question of sacrifice arises. What are you willing to give up to gain more, or to gain truth, or to gain your true identity? We see this in Palpatine, where he is willing to die to himself and allow himself to die in order that the posterity and the capacity of evil increases. Now, pause here. Think back to the first movie in episode 4, where Obi-Wan Kenobi says to Darth Vader in the climactic lightsaber scene, the Death Star, "If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you could possibly imagine." And here we see it again in the resolution of the three trilogies, episode 9, where we see this symbolic pattern brought back and used to really a larger, fuller extent, but not in goodness, but in evil, in Palpatine, where if he is to be struck down to carry out this ritual, then evil will rise and emerge, and its capacity will increase, and its posterity will be generations upon generations. I thought they did a fantastic job bringing back the symbolism of episode 4 and taking it to a next level, and not just doing the same thing and repeating it with new names, kind of like an analogy or a metaphor tactic, but really using it in a symbolic, kind of a musical way, where they're drawing upon it but making it something new and something grand. The next sacrifice after Palpatine is Rey. What is Rey willing to give up? And what we find is that she decides to die to her name of Palpatine and her identity of evil and of darkness, the dark side, and to rise with a new identity of goodness, to emerge as a Jedi. Great scene with the voices of the saints, if you want to call them that are encouraging her to rise up in faith and really to claim her identity in faith, because there's a risk involved. There's always a risk in sacrifice, because there's the chaos or potential ahead of not really knowing for sure if you're going to get the other end of the sacrificial deal where you lay down this and this rises up and you get this. So, in faith and the encouragement of the Jedi saints around her, she rises up and in so doing puts to death her Palpatine identity and assumes the identity of Jedi. The next character to make a sacrifice is, at this point, Ben Solo, who used to be Kylo Ren. And we see him get discarded pretty immediately into a pit, and he just falls into the abyss. Again, drawing from Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, where Palpatine himself was cast off into a very similar, ominous-looking pit, shadowed and covered. You don't really see him fall. And of course, what happens is Ben Solo rises. He rises, as if rising out of the grave or rising out of Hades, to save his dyadic partner, Rey. And in the similar life force transition or transaction, he gives his full life, his full energy force, so that she will be filled with life. There's a sweet moment where the both of them lock eyes at each other and chuckle and even share a kiss. And his sacrifice is made complete because his life was transferred to her, so he dies. And really there's an interesting thing happening here, several interesting things happening here, because it shows that behind the scenes there's also the mother in the form of Leia helping and establishing, and she is using the last gas, the last bit of life force energy she has to help her son make this sacrifice. So is she like a Mother Mary figure? Like what's happening here? A lot of people, I imagine, were thinking about the kiss, and for a moment I was like, ew. Kind of like the ew when you realize that Leia and Luke shared a kiss and realize they're brother and sister, and you're like, that's kind of incestuous and weird and gross. I can't believe it. But I don't think that's what's happening. I think what's happening is they share the embrace of pure love's kiss. A pure love, a pure kiss. The purity of oneness in a dyadic or an androgynous being where there's two persons that fully embrace each other in oneness. That's the type of kiss I think is really happening here. And for one moment, they get to share their perfect oneness together. So I think the writers of Star Wars are drawing upon these ancient stories of symbolism of masculine and feminine and dyadic oneness or androgynous oneness to great effect. I felt like perplexed and intrigued, and I sensed that there was a greater level of intent and sophistication in the writing of this movie and their use of symbolism in a musical way. Good on them. They're really drawing upon a lot of the Christ-like symbolism as well. For example, when Ben Solo gives his life so Rey could live, this is the ultimate sacrifice, not just a sacrifice, the ultimate one. And of course, the words of Christ come up in the Gospel of John. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. That's all I have for now, guys. I believe I'm going to watch the movie at least one more time in theaters and many more times to come once it comes out on streaming platforms, Disney Plus or whatever, or DVD. I'm going to sit down and really sort through a lot of these things more fully and plan to produce some videos specifically zooming in on some of these themes that are happening. Let me know what you think of the film in the comment section below. If you'd like to support this work, you can do so by telling friends, getting the word out. This is a new channel, and the more that people talk about it and share it with other people on social media platforms or just verbally, person to person, the better. Also support financially using the PayPal link in the description below. Thanks for watching.